Action. We're on now. Welcome to Syd and Malcolm. I don't know why it's Syd and Malcolm. It should be just Syd because basically it's a whole show.
Well, that's not true.
Yes, it is. Syd, introduce our guest.
You pop in a little bit, which is great.
Introduce our guest and tell us what the topic is today.
Well, we are going to be talking about how green is my charity. And we are pretty green. We were the first charity actually to equate what we call trying to reduce both the poverty footprint and the carbon footprint. And there's always been a lot of speculation as to what is the core value of food if it's not being eaten. And to us is, well, it can be donated. And if it's donated, what is the worth of that food to the people that are getting it and to the people that are giving it away? And that's where we come in. My background is very eclectic, but I do have a Bachelor of Science in Geology. And at a time when there was not a lot of environmental geology, I was very involved with a professor that I had who we named Dr. Sludge, because he was taking core samples of Jamaica Bay to see how garbage was affecting plant and animal life in Jamaica Bay. And it made us very cognizant of what waste can do if it's improperly being dumped. And we went out on a number of rides on a boat that he had to take core samples of Jamaica Bay. And we had to read a book, which is now probably out of print, but it was called Environmental Geology by Dr. Peter Flawn, who was the head of geology at the University of Texas in Austin. And it made us cognizant of things like algae bloom, greenhouse gas, and the way it affected our planet. And this goes back 50 years ago. So it's not from today, yet there was people that were involved in it, and I was involved in when I taught earth science in high school in 1972 to 76, we absolutely spent time talking about the changing climate and the changing planet that we lived in. And we spent so much time dealing with the ice ages that took place. There's been at least 3 ice ages that have taken place that have covered, for the most part, most of North America, changing life completely in those places. And the remnants of the ice ages now would be things like glacial erratics, which are boulders that are left all over the Northeast that were left there and carried down by the glaciers. These boulders could weigh anywhere from 1 ton to 50 tons, yet they were on top of the glacier. And as the glacier melted, they couldn't be returned back to where they were gotten from. They just laid where they are. And there's quite a number of these glacial erratics on Long Island. The other remnants of the glaciers are the Great Lakes, and quite a number of the lakes in New York State, the Finger Lakes, are all leftovers of the glaciers. Rock and Wrap It Up has been collecting food for 30 plus years now. And about 15 years ago, I started thinking about what else are we doing by collecting the food? And it was keeping out of landfill food that could be consumed. And the value of that food could be measured not just in weight, but in the diversion of greenhouse gases. And I work closely with the EPA and the US Department of Agriculture, and we developed statistics that were able to give a value to each pound of food. And each pound of food that is donated is able to save 0.543 pounds of greenhouse gas from being released. So by the food being consumed and not going to rot in a landfill, is saving 0.543 pounds of food. And it didn't have a lot of value 15 years ago, Malcolm, but James, and I'll introduce James in a minute, it was very much 15 years ago, like when Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone, and he had no one to talk to. Here is this great invention, and all he had to speak to was a guy named Watson. And that is pretty much what happened 15 years ago. There wasn't that much interest, but that all changed in the past 15 years. And we were blessed to have Jim Spellos, and I'm going to have Jim introduce himself in a minute. Jim joined us through a mutual friend and has been with the charity over 20 years now. And Jim's background is, like mine, rather eclectic. There's a physics part of his background, I'm sure. But it's because of his vision that our tiny little charity has almost a cachet to it that looks a little bit bigger than it is. Professor Spellos, how are you?
You're too kind. I'm doing great. And it's such a wonderful thing to be on the podcast and be able to work with Syd for all these years. You know, what we've been able to do, and it really is a collective team effort, is to take all this great ideology that Syd had and bring it into the digital age. You know, I think it's really clear that for us to be able to be a charity that really has legs moving forward, we have to connect to all generations, and we clearly have to connect using the tools that are out there. So coming on board 20 years ago, just because I heard there was this really cool guy who liked the dead, who was doing some charity work in Long Island, you know, sort of turned into, you know, dear friendships, as well as being able to support an amazing organization. So, you know, the little work that I've been doing for this organization over the years hopefully pushes us into the geeky realm, where we become a little more technical and are able to keep our reach further and further out there.
One of the things that we felt was important is to develop a tool that everyone could use without really being a rocket science computer maven, but can basically just plug a number in and get an answer out that would make sense to a lot of other people. And we started working on this, and I did rip off a name. I hate saying it, but I was an advocate of the Whole Earth Catalog when I was in college. And I just love the sound of it. So I said, what the heck? Let's call it the Whole Earth Calculator. And that made a lot of sense to us. And we started, yeah, Jim.
Well, it's a great story because I walk into Syd's place one day and he's brewing on this, and he has a spreadsheet open and he goes, look at this information. This is amazing. And I go, what is it? He said, this converts the pounds of food that we're picking up and converts it into sustainability information. I said, Syd, that's genius. There should be an app for that. And Malcolm, you ever know when you say something, you've just given yourself a project? I realized that, you know, what he was going to say, which is what he said, which is what a great idea. Build it.
Do it.
Now, you know, at that point, couldn't really do it. It was early game. We were talking about the early part of the last decade, you know, actually early mid part. When was the Super Bowl at the Meadowlands? Probably 2015 or so, 2014. Because it was whenever that was is when we started working on it. And I was able to find a company through my previous career, which was running events before I started teaching technology full time. And they were willing to do it for us and kept it up for a couple of years. But what's really, really exciting is a couple of years later, they couldn't keep up anymore. They had too much business. And so I go, okay, I'm going to have to figure this out myself. So if you were to go right now, for example, to our website, you would find a page with these sustainability calculators on there. And let me just show you something, because the way we've set it up is that, for example, if we're able to pick up, and I know Amy was on the podcast last week and talking about from the film sets and the TV sets, but if we were to pick up 250 pounds of food, that whomever is doing this work, be it the people at the studios or Amy or whomever is doing the pickup for us, All they would have to do is click a button and they'd be able to see not only the number of meals served, but also the CO2 that's not emitted from the landfills, which is exactly what Syd was talking about. And more recently, we've been able to put in the gallons of water saved by having that food being consumed rather than going to waste. So the Whole Earth Calculator was born based on this, well, let's do it. And it really has a life of its own. And I'm sure we'll talk during the half hour about different iterations of it. But the calculator itself is really, really straightforward. It's okay, what are we picking up? And then I think you might have seen on the screen that what we were able to do at that point is also do it for paper and plastics and for composting. Obviously, the food recovery is more of what we tend to get people to use, but all that is there, for people to be able to come to the website or the app. We'll talk about that in a bit, and have that access and be able to see really what the impact is on not just the people whom we're feeding, which is amazing, but on the planet as well.
One of the amazing things was that when we offered this to the NFL for the Super Bowl, whatever it was 6 years ago, maybe Super Bowl 48, sounds like it might have been. But the NFL said, sure, we want to be sustainable, not realizing that a couple of things had happened. And this is now off the record, but obviously it's not off the record if I'm speaking about it. And that was the amount of food that we recovered from Super Bowl 48 was somewhere around 37,000 pounds of food that was not used. And a lot of people don't want that number to be out there because it shows some kind of not neglect, but an over ordering would be the right expression. And the 37,000 pounds of food came out to something around 20,000 pounds of CO2e that was not diverted. And the number of meals we were able to show them. And the Super Bowl people, the NFL, put this on their website. Jim could give you the numbers right now. And it's pretty amazing, when you see how simple things could be. And since that time, sports has always tried to become greener and greener and greener. I was the keynote speaker 11 years ago at an organization called the Green Sports Alliance. It was, at the time, it was headed by Dr. Alan Hershkowitz, who was from an organization called the NRDC, National Resource Defense Fund. And they had me speak about this, and it was so new to everyone. And there was about 400 people there. And this was before we had the calculator. I said, we want to talk about reducing poverty and carbon footprints. And it was right up their alley. And by the time some years went by, we had over 80 stadiums and arenas that wanted to have this number to put on their website after each event. And we do this now for almost all of our teams here and across the country. We do it, we're asked by the Colorado Rockies, we're asked by the Houston Astros, Chicago White Sox, New York Mets, New York Yankees, Padres.
I have a simple question for you now. I really have not heard of this before. Are those numbers displayed on the scoreboards of the major stadiums?
They were in Yankee Stadium when we honored the Yankees 7-8 years ago. It's on their website, and it's in there's an NFL brochure that's printed each year. We're in the NFL brochure. We're in the Major League Baseball yearly report.
And I'm wondering if there's a way to get the networks or the broadcasters of those sporting events to mention that number and mention what it is.
I think one thing to Syd's point here is that oftentimes they don't want to know how much excess there is that drives that number. I know as a former person in the hospitality industry, there's tons of excess food there. And these organizations love the fact that it's being diverted. But when you start saying, okay, so we're going to announce that 37,000 pounds of food weren't used, it doesn't make their shareholders feel that good. So it's a real awkward situation sometimes.
Well, you don't have to mention, the exact numbers, but the food not being used isn't being donated
Yeah, well, that we do, and
for
that
the
clearly we
course.
do talk about,
And
absolutely.
we do write press releases as these go on. The larger events, years ago when we were picking up food from the MTV Video Music Awards, MTV would always put a caveat that all food that was left over was donated to Rock and Wrap It Up. We didn't have to give a number, but they acknowledged that it was not going into landfill.
Right, because they're also, most major events now, they say, and so much is going to charity, and
Yep.
they'll read off a charity. So I think this, I don't know, if you have the people to speak to the network people or the announcers, but as I say, I'm a sports nut. And I listen to all the games, and I've never heard, of this before.
Right. So
And
this
it
would
should be a
be
way
on
of
the
reaching me.
website. There is a social responsibility person now in every team, in every sport. So they use the data as they want to, but it's our job really to generate the data. And I want Jim to talk a little bit about the donation form that
Mhm.
he developed.
Well, a lot of the stuff that we done is sort of the simplification of the process. We go, okay, how do we make it as easy as possible for someone who doesn't know technology, who might not even be that comfortable with a website, to be able to donate it? So, the tools that we're using, Malcolm, it's really interesting, are all, off, basic tools anyone can use. Tends to be a lot of Google Sheets that we're using as a back-end database, and the form capabilities. So we produced a very quick form that allows the person, let's say they're going to one of the network shows that they're picking up from, within 2 minutes, they can fill in the basic information. And in a second, I'll bring it up on the screen so you can see it. But that basic information essentially will then go right into our database, and then we can extract that right out any way we can. So reports about how much a particular show did or a particular ball club did become very, very easy. To your question earlier, Malcolm, about why you don't hear about it, it's much more sexy to hear the announcers talk about Francisco Lindor joining the Mets than it is to hear how much food they saved. I mean, what their audience wants clearly is about the sports, but we're playing a critical role in the background for them and other organizations to be able to make sure we're doing the right thing with the excess food in so many ways.
Yeah, but no, what I'm saying is that now it's actually in vogue for these, sports teams or the stadiums to announce what charities they're helping.
Yeah.
Whether it be the Black Lives Matters or things like that. They're always promoting, or for the cancer research, they're always promoting things like this. And now in vogue, what's very much in vogue, of course, is hunger in America, hunger around the world, and also the climate change and how we can help it. So I thought it might be, the opportune time for the sports teams or the owners to promote what they're doing. But of course, they have to be told to promote.
So form is simple, looks like that. It fits perfectly on a phone. And everything we've been doing over the past 5 years really is with the thought of optimizing for social and optimizing for mobile, because that's essentially how we can make sure we can get it in everybody's hands. And you can see the form just gives them basic questions. A lot of them are just check off which category, where it is, the total amount of food recovered. If they're picking up pans as opposed to knowing the pounds, we can convert that for them, paper or plastics, boom, and you submit, and it goes into our back end. And that back end, as you can see here, I'm not going to show too much of it, is just literally every single pickup that we've done over the past, I think now 7 years, we have in there. And so we can aggregate that content simply.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, this concept, I don't think that anyone has ever thought about it before.
Right. That's the brilliance of Syd, it's being
We
able
did,
to really.
the other thing I think that is so important, that the boards of directors have changed. So many of the teams now are having younger board members, and some of them bring to the table sustainability, and that the team itself is able to answer to those board members that yes, we are not only giving it away, but look what we're doing to help the planet. And we always speak about the three P's that make up most businesses today, and that is people, profit, planet. And if you are not involved in those three P's, you are not a 21st century company. And with all of the discussion on climate change, whether you agree or disagree, I don't want food going into landfill that'll feed people. Let's talk on a moral, ethical point of view. Every team, every TV show, every place that we pick up from has to produce more than what they're contracted for. So they can't ever run out of food. And they'll always work somewhere between 8 and 10% over what they anticipate having for that reason, because it would be the biggest embarrassment if they're catering for 5,000 people and they only have enough food for 4,500 people. Well, you're gonna have 500 pissed off people. And
it's so tricky because, again, from the hospitality industry, there's a standard overage that they're going to order for. But we're coming out of COVID and back into where live events are again being considered and talked about. And one of the questions that's out there is, how much do we order? How many people will show up? What are they going to be comfortable eating? There's a huge part of this whole conversation where the meetings and events industry has really just put their feet in the sand to really move this forward, because they were afraid of legality and didn't understand the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act. But moving forward, hopefully they're going to go, it doesn't matter what it is. We know that if we have this excess food, there's something we can do with it. And some of our partners, I know Discover Albany being one of them, is just talks to their clients every time they're bringing an event into town, saying, hey, you can do this and we can help you facilitate that, because this is a great organization that has a lock key system for you.
It sounds like my wife is cooking dinner for her family. Generally, she overcooks, but in our instance, all the extra food go to the cousins, the aunts. Everybody has dinner for the next 2 weeks.
Doesn't happen at an event that way. Sometimes it goes to the staff, and I get that. If you're going to feed your staff that way, great. But when it gets to the point of throwing it out, it's not acceptable to Syd. It's not acceptable to any one of us who participate in this organization. It just doesn't make any sense.
It's not acceptable to me, who's really not involved with it. It's always the waste of food. Going back to, I used to work up in the Catskill Mountains when I was in college. There is so much waste of food there. It's amazing.
It's incredible. You don't want to know. I mean, and the whole supermarket issue, which we haven't even delved into, how 35-40% of all the food is being thrown away. I mean, it makes your stomach turn.
But is there any use of food that has been cooked? I know part in the Catskill Mountains is that they had the American style. So you could go in and you could get, for dinner, you could get three courses of the main dish, and people take a bite and say, oh, it's no good. And, they throw out the rest.
Yeah.
But I don't know if there's anything you could do.
Well, the key component of what we do, I'm going to step in here and Syd will obviously fill in details, is, following the Bill Samaritan Good Samaritan, the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act, is that we focus on prepared but not served. We do that because we do run the risk of feeding an at-risk, society with food that you don't know where it's been. So I know other organizations pick that stuff up, but our focus is what's in the kitchen, what hasn't been brought out. And we do make sure that we respect the needs of the organization, not wanting to get into any liability, because there is no liability when you're doing it the right way. And at the same time, respecting the health of the people who are going to be benefiting from getting the food. Syd, did I answer that right?
Yeah, one of the things that we really try to emphasize, there is always a backup tray of anything that's out on a buffet, backing it up, and we get the backup tray that has not gone out. So that refrigerated backup tray is in a back area, and it would be used to replenish a buffet if it's set up. But that is the food that we tell them we want. And I just had an interesting meeting. There's a new store that opened up nearby us. It opened up on Monday, Target. And Target started carrying food staples. I went and I met with the manager today, basically saying, you know, we're picking up from Costco, Trader Joe's, that's some other places in their mall, Panera, Chipotle. And I said, we're interested in getting your food that is in date uh, and that has been held in a safe way. And he just looked at me and he said, so you won't take anything that's out of date? And I said, no. He says, you're one of the few organizations, because we work with other organizations that will take things that are out of date that have been stored properly. And I said to him, and the at-risk population that we deal with is not just financially at risk. So many of them have immunological deficiencies. They have allergies. They have things that they'll never tell you about. And we're here to protect them. And by having food that we know is the same food that we will eat, that is in date food, we are taking one risk factor off the table. And that is something that other agencies, you know, are just not involved with. I spoke about 8 or 9 years ago in Berkeley at what was called the first Zero Waste Conference. And Berkeley invited dozens and dozens of people throughout the country there. And I spoke after the CEO of a great organization called Food Runners of San Francisco. It's been around 10 years. And the CEO remarked that they even go into dumpsters in places that they know about, and they take food from there. And the audience, you know, was shaking their head like, wow, that's great, you know. And then I get up there and after I spoke, I said, I just want to address one item. I would be remiss if I didn't say that we are not in favor of dumpster diving. And I spoke about, again, the immunological deficiencies of so many on the line of people that we're feeding. And I didn't want to embarrass the woman, but I wanted no one in the audience to think that dumpster diving is something positive. It's not. And yet a lot of people do it. And I have, you know, the one thing we could say as an organization, it's always safety first. You want to have, number one, Diane spoke a couple of episodes ago about how important it is for the agency to have a health certificate issued by a local municipality. If they don't have that, it's a non-starter for us, Malcolm. We need to know that there's some set of eyeballs that have looked at their operation and said, thumbs up, they know what they're doing, they could feed people. And that's good enough for us. And that's why, unlike a lot of other charities, I prefer to have the charity that's going to serve the food is the same charity that does the recovery of the food. So they have an eyeball on the food the entire time, from when it leaves the arena, stadium, TV studio to the time that it is served to someone on that line. There's been someone that recognizes that stability of the food and the safety of the food. And we really pride ourselves in that. And that's what we teach. You know, people ask us, you know, what's the most important thing? And I start with that. Because if you have somebody that is on a line that is hungry, they don't give a shit what they're eating half the time, sadly. They just want to eat.
Right.
I feel ethically responsible that they're going to have something that's not going to get them sick. And that, to me, is the most important thing that I could say. Just like a doctor in the Hippocratic Oath, what do they say? Do no harm. Well, I believe the same thing. If we're going to feed people, we have to make sure that they're going to be eating healthy food.
How many organizations or charities are similar to yours that are functioning?
I don't think any.
Yeah, because I haven't heard of any groups aside from yourself.
Well, I mean, there are thousands of charities that do food recovery,
Yeah.
and most of them are fabulous. One of the things that's happened, it's not happened in the United States, but over the last 3 years, Germany, Italy, France, and England have laws in place that do not allow their supermarkets to throw any item away that's in date. So it puts the onus on them to find partners to give the food to. The US has not done that. And I had meetings with Mayor de Blasio's Office of Sustainability, must be 7 years ago, to tell them what was being done overseas. And there was no way that they could put pressure on those markets to do that. But our country can, if they wanted to, pass the same kinds of laws that if items are in date, you cannot put them into a landfill.
Yeah.
Anyway, guys, you hear the beep, 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 beep. That's our half-hour time.
Well, that was pretty
Wow.
fast.
That's quick.
That goes by fast when we have interesting topics.
Can I just make one comment?
You can make several
I'm wearing a
comments.
shirt. I want to show my shirt.
Ozzy Osbourne.
Ozzy was the first rock star to do a PSA for Rock and Wrap It Up in 1995 about food being thrown out. And he used an English expression. He said, it either goes in the bin or it feeds someone, and I'd rather feed someone. A bin is a garbage pail in England. And Ozzy was on 3 different networks in the Miami area in 1995. And he got it, and so did Sharon. They both, have been such stalwarts for us, such, in everyone's face as to how important this is to feed people with food that's prepared but not served.
Well, I'd love to get them to come onto a show and do a spot on it, or talk about it.
You know what? We could ask Sharon. She's very busy. It was 5 days a week, and she has a family. But we'll put the word out, see if she's available.
Well, on Zoom, we could do it at her pleasure. We don't have to do it the time we do it. I could do it at 12 o'clock midnight if she's a midnight person, and if it's okay with you.
Ozzy's the midnight person. I think we got the wrong one.
He's the rock and roller. I mean, come on, of course he is.
But anyway, Jim, thank you very, very much for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you again.
Hope so, Malcolm. Thank you for having me.
And I will speak to you more about doing the Zoom casting, because it seems you have the knowledge.
I've done it once or twice over the past few years.
Yes, but the thing also, what I need is, as we talk, is doing the marketing. That's the hard thing. How to get the word out. I think we have a great show, and of course, you guys have a great organization. But how do we get more eyes to see it?
Yeah, that's what always is critical. Well,
anyway,
thank you
guys,
for having me.
Thanks much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, James.
Always a pleasure.
And we're